Good morning, hello and welcome. My name is Bhuvan Apurvajha. This is the Indian Express Explained. Let's get started. So, two topics I have for you today. It shouldn't be long for us to go ahead and cover the entirety of the two topics. The first one is to do with adultery. This is a lead article in the Indian Express Explained page. So, we will seek to understand section 497 of the erstwhile IPC. Now that is being replaced by the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. Okay, so we'll seek to understand section 497, right? Why was it struck down by the Supreme Court, and why the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita is looking to bring it back, and in what form? Okay, the debate around that entire section 497 has to be understood in entirety. We'll do that. That's agenda number one. And agenda number two is to go ahead, announced last evening that India will be hosting the second edition of the Voice of the Global South Summit. Okay, the first edition was held earlier this year in January. It had close to 125 nations that came together. So the second edition of that is going to be held tomorrow in virtual format. So we'll take a look at the summit, the themes, but more importantly, this whole conversation around India being the voice of the global south, right? So what are these evidences that point to that fact that yes, India is indeed acting like a voice of the global south? And say what are the challenges that India will have to face in the coming days and coming years. We need to identify that, because again this makes for a very good mains question. What are the evidences, again pro and cons both, to the for side and the against side. We need to go ahead and realize that. So let's do that. ठीक है? Manju, Meet Khandelwal, Bulbul, good morning guys, thanks for joining this morning. ठीक है? If you have any particular questions related to what I discuss here today, and if you want to go ahead and access the PDF of this entire lecture, well, you be a part of my Telegram ID. I normally upload the entire PDF of the lecture at around noon. Right. So the first topic from the Indian Express Explained. Coder, good morning. How are you? Welcome. Okay, why adultery was struck off the Indian Penal Code, and why a House panel wants to make it a crime again. Which House panel first? Let's understand this. So, when you study parliamentary committees, right? You have, say, ad hoc committees and standing committees. You have all of those different kinds of committees, permanent and temporary in nature. You have departmental related standing committees now. Okay, departmentally related standing committees, which look after the, say, day-to-day functioning of individual, say, sectors of the government. So the departmentally related standing committee for Home Affairs, right? This has been tasked with going ahead and looking at, say, the newer version of Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita that will replace the erstwhile or the colonial legacy Indian Penal Code. Okay, so they are looking at, say, different laws and different, say, rules and regulations. What's the efficacy of the rules and regulations? How pertinent are they in 2023? One of the primary criticisms we often give is that, oh, the year is 2023, but the law is of 18th century, 19th century. So this standing committee is looking at those aspects. Okay, please understand that the departmentally related standing committee on Home Affairs is one of the 24 such departmental related standing committees. Okay, it has 31 members, 21 from the Lok Sabha, and if I'm not wrong, 10 from the Rajya Sabha. Okay, and they look at all policy matters, right? They look at policy matters or papers that are laid in front of the House, right? Papers laid. All of these things they will take a look at. They will not be concerned with the, say, day-to-day functioning of the department. That's outside their ambit. Okay, they will just take a look at the policy-related matters, the larger perspective questions. And specifically, if any particular paper has been laid on the table of the House for the consideration of, say, the Speaker of the House or the Chairman of the Rajya Sabha. Right. So this particular committee is tasked with this entire thing. They will go ahead and take a look at adultery. Your neighbor, good morning, welcome. Okay. So now in 2018, the Supreme Court declared IPC section 497, which is going to be the crux of the entire discussion, okay, which punished men but not women for adultery. So the Supreme Court strikes it down, basically it being discriminatory in nature. Okay. Now the Parliamentary Committee on Home Affairs has suggested that adultery should be reinstituted as a crime. Here it is. Up until now, 2018 onwards, this was no more a crime. But this particular departmental related standing committee on Home Affairs has said it should be a crime. But in what form? That is very important for us to understand. Because straight away, point number one, that it was struck down. Why? Because it was discriminatory. Okay? Right? So let's go ahead and understand. Firstly, what is adultery? What is the Indian legal definition of adultery? How is it different from, say, the grammar or the vocab definition that you learn? Okay, let's understand that first. शुरुआत से शुरुआत करते हैं. Okay, and what are the different interpretations we need to understand that from the exam perspective? Okay, let's go ahead. This is the dictionary meaning of adultery, by the way. Okay, voluntary sexual intercourse between a married person and a person who is not their spouse. You see how gender neutral this is, right? Nowhere has it been mentioned, say, husband, wife, or anything of that sort. It's just two people, two individuals in a marriage. If one of them cheats sexually outside the marriage, that's considered to be adultery. Now let's look at the Indian legal definition of adultery. Okay? That is very important for us to understand. Section 497 of the IPC, which was struck down in 2018, by the way. The Supreme Court said it is null and void. It is no more in operation. But up until 2018, what was the definition? So the definition, whoever has sexual intercourse with a person who is and whom he knows or has reason to believe to be the wife of another man. You see, it is no more gender neutral first. More importantly, these lines, have a look at these lines. Without the consent or connivance of that man. Which means, this in a way you are almost pointing at the fact that the woman is a possession for the husband to keep, and the husband has a right to say on, say, what the woman does or does not do. Okay, how is the husband going to go ahead and be like almost a quasi-judicial nature in that manner? You know. So first point, without the consent or connivance of the man. Okay, and one more thing that you need to know is, in such a case, the wife shall not be punishable as an abettor, which means the entire burden you are putting on the husband. Right? So this was the definition of adultery in India until 2018. Then finally, in the Joseph Shine case, okay, the Joseph Shine and Union of India case, you had the five judge bench of the Supreme Court, which means a constitution bench. This comes up and says, unanimously strikes down section 497 of the IPC, that it includes discrimination. How is the burden entirely on the husband and not on the wife? Is it to say that, when you talk about adultery, that only the man is going to commit adultery? Is the woman not capable of committing adultery? Right? So this was the question before the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court strikes it down. Now the Parliamentary Committee on Home Affairs has said that it wants to reintroduce adultery, but now it wants to make the language gender neutral. No more this husband-wife nonsense going on. Straight away, we will follow the international definition of adultery. That two people in a sacrosanct institution such as a marriage should go ahead and commit themselves to the marriage, and in case one of them does commit adultery, then they face the law of the land. Right? But then there are some larger questions that you need to consider now. So for example, in a civilized state, how pertinent or how relevant is it for the government to get involved in these sensitive matters? Should the government get involved in the bedroom of people? Okay. What say privacy related concerns may so arise? Do you realize so many facets can come up straight away when you start to link it to as an individual or two individuals versus state? Do you realize that? Okay. So the committee is of the view that the institution of marriage is considered sacred and that there is a need to safeguard its sanctity. Okay. So now the onus of being faithful should lie with both the partners in a marriage. This is what the focus of the departmentally related Standing Committee on Home Affairs that is looking at reintroducing adultery is concerned. No more should it be just about, say, man or woman or husband or wife. It should be gender neutral first. But now there is a problem. The problem is that the Supreme Court has rendered it unconstitutional. The Supreme Court's ruling is the law of the land, is it not, guys? Right? So how does the Parliament work around that then? Okay, let's go ahead and understand that. This is, by the way, the legal position so far. Okay. So now, the issue to it then. Number one, Section 497, like you would have understood by now, promoting discrimination. the Supreme Court judgment was detailed. It just did not go ahead and say this much. It says that 497 was violative of 14, 15 and 21. Now you know this. Fundamental rights of equality, okay, discrimination and well, life. So the Supreme Court is observing that, well, section 497 was struck down on the grounds of these three primarily. The court underlined the autonomy of women as a facet of human dignity. The husband is not the master of his wife, nor does he have legal sovereignty over the wife. Very crucial observations. Okay. So what does this tell me? That the Supreme Court was also of the same view that time. That this particular line that you see here, you see this line here. Without the consent or connivance of that man. Now what happens if there is consent? For example, two individuals, husband and wife. Okay. Now the husband gives his consent for the wife to go ahead and commit adultery with some other person. In that case, is it outside the legal scope? Which means, what are you going to assume? That this person has complete authority over this person's choices, this person's sexuality. Do you realize this is the question the Supreme Court also rendered unconstitutional? Alongside saying that, well, this is discriminatory, the onus is completely on the husband. More so it said, well, who is the husband to have onus on first? You know, why are you getting involved in the sexuality of your wife? Or say her choices, her decisions. Okay? Okay. So for any other purpose, now look at this. The Parliament has perceived or may at any time perceive to treat it as a criminal offence, it says will offend the two facets of Article 21. This is a Supreme Court ruling, by the way. I have taken these lines from there itself. Okay. This is what it's saying. That if you go ahead and the Parliament goes and treats it as a criminal offence, then the Parliament will be wrong on two counts. Okay? Two counts. One, you are talking about the dignity. That the state is playing with the, say, individual reputation, sanctity of two individuals in a marriage. Okay? It's again a very relevant charge to make. And number two, the privacy. How important or how relevant is it for the state to get involved in the bedrooms of people? If at all it should get involved at all. That also is another conversation. Okay? So the court also struck down section 198. So 497 was gone. Okay. Now it also goes ahead and strikes down another one. 198 subclause 2. Now what does 198 say? Okay? That the courts can take cognizance of a matter only if approached by an aggrieved party, and when it is an adultery case, then only the husband can be aggrieved. Aggrieved is when you have reasons to believe that, say, you have been wronged. Okay. So the court snatches away this power too. So a person who might, say, commit adultery, her husband cannot approach the courts. That right also has been taken away. Do you realize? So these are the major issues regarding 497 and the reintroduction of 497 by the Departmentally Related Standing Committee on Home Affairs. Okay. Now, is there a way the Parliament can go ahead and circumvent this? Okay. Can it work around this Supreme Court ruling? It can. Okay. Although, this is again, you should note this, that a Supreme Court ruling is in fact considered to be the law of the land. It is a part of the judicial precedence. Right? Judicial precedence has immense value, immense sanctity, okay, immense relevance in the future lawmaking of a country. Right? So since it's the law of the land, can you also go ahead and circumvent it? So only to the point that the divergence so exists. Okay. So let's look at it. Parliament cannot simply pass a law that contradicts a ruling of the Supreme Court. However, it can pass a law that removes the basis of the court's judgment. Very, very important, guys. Okay? So how can it do so? It can be, say, done in the past date also, backdated also, or future dated also, retrospective, prospective, both. But in this case, the Madras Bar Association, the Supreme Court bench had said that the defect pointed out should have been cured by a parliamentary legislation such that the basis of the judgment is removed. In this case, the basis of the Supreme Court's judgment is that it is not gender neutral. However, if Parliament passes a law making adultery not gender neutral and, say, probably having safeguards in place to go ahead and, say, prevent exploitation of that particular law, then the Supreme Court's judgment ruling can be circumvented around. Okay, are you able to understand and grasp the gist of this entire topic? Okay, this makes for a very pertinent question in the mains. You can also go ahead and approach it from the essay perspective, because eventually it is talking about the most basic elements of an individual. It's talking about dignity, it's talking about privacy, it's talking about the state versus the individual that we often try to understand in depth. Yes, so this can be a very good evidence if you are taking a contradictory position or even a position on this entire topic. Okay, so if you understood this entire discussion on whether adultery should be a criminal offense, should not be a criminal offense, what's the history of adultery in India, more importantly, what's the divergence in definition of, say, adultery in English language and adultery in the legal sense in India, yes, then do consider leaving me a like. I'd most appreciate it. And if you have any particular questions, you can go ahead and shoot your questions in the comment box. I'll be more than happy to take them. Okay? Right? Let's look at the questions then. What's the fun without any questions, guys? Okay. Question number 1. Transfer posting of senior officers, promotion eligibility, demand for grants, policy documents laid on the table of the House. Which of the above are under the scope of the responsibility of Parliamentary Committee on Home Affairs? Okay. Like I told you, it's a departmentally related standing committee. Okay. So go ahead and let me know. I have told you, say, what are the brief or the more important work that a departmentally related standing committee does. Okay, answer this question for me in the comment box. And question number 2, excuse me, no minister can be a part of it. 21 members from the Lok Sabha, 10 from the Rajya Sabha, and the term of the standing committee is 1 year only. How many of the above are true in case of departmentally related standing committees? You will let me know your answers in the comment box. Okay? Have a good look at these questions. More importantly, be absolutely aware about parliamentary committees. You know, it has been one of the FAQs insofar as PYQs is concerned. It has been frequently asked, not just say in the prelims, but also in the mains. So it's best advised that you go ahead and acquaint yourself with the entirety of parliamentary committees. I have uploaded a Telegram, a PDF on my Telegram channel, right, which is an explainer on the entirety of parliamentary committees. Have a look at that too. Okay? Right, before I go forward very quickly and in say 60 seconds or less, the English batch for the P2I course is starting tomorrow. Okay, tomorrow evening the orientation session is planned at 6 p.m. And if you understand the way we approach concepts here, specifically the way I tend to go ahead and explain, you know, the whole history of it, the future outlook of it, the relevant challenges, yes, all I expected you to do is go ahead, access the PDF, include the PDF in your own note making, and then revise it time and again. And more importantly, focus on the questions. Okay, and this is the entire mantra that the entire team at StudyIQ IAS is following in a bid to make sure that we have the maximum number of students who benefit out of this entire initiative, the Prelims to Interview initiative. Okay, the English batch starts tomorrow. Make sure that you go ahead and quickly sign up. Use the code BALIVE, as that assures you a good amount of discount. Plus, you get allotted to my batch and we can get started with geography and IR and CSAT and environment, and my esteemed colleagues can take a look at the other subjects for you. Okay? So make sure that you sign up. You have the sign up link in the description box below. Okay? Don't forget to use the code BALIVE. Right? That was 60 seconds. Okay, let's go forward. So announced last evening, guys, global unity in focus. India gears up for the second Voice of the Global South Summit. So for those of you who have been, say, consistent with your current affairs, one thing you will know is that the first edition of the Global Voice of the Global South Summit happened this year in January. Okay, and around, say, 125 members attended it. Yes, 125 members had attended it from the Global South. Now, in the past, we have discussed, you know, what is the Global South, what is the Global North. You know, initially you had, say, the New World and the Old World. And then you started, you know, having these different sorts of terminologies over time. You had first world, second world, third world. You had peripheral world, core world, buffer world. Okay, these are different lines. But more importantly, one important concept that you need to be aware of is the Brandt line. Okay, we'll discuss Brandt line in a minute. So Global South is essentially a conglomerate, a group of nations that have been historically done injustice to. And as a result, their economies have not developed, their people have lesser opportunities, fewer opportunities, and say this is the historical conversation. But more importantly, going into the future, you find that the majority of the countries of the global south are the ones that will bear the brunt of the climate change, right? So global south becomes a very important topic for you to consider. Now, when you consider India's role in it, most recently, you had the African Union, where that was included in the G20. Yes, Prime Minister Modi and the New Delhi summit. Yes, African Union came aboard as a member. And so what you will often find is that India takes a lead in so far as engaging the rest of the world, the global north and the allies, as a representative of the global south is concerned. Now, will you consider this for a moment? Is India the only contender? Of course not. Yes, you are looking at China, that also has its own finger in the pie. It also wants to be seen on an equal basis, not just as a leader of the global south, but as a leader of the entire world. But there is a difference in approach, and we've discussed that. Economically, China has a very strict, invasive, non-negotiable, translucent approach. India's approach is completely different. Okay, we are much more willing to be flexible, transparent. Yes, we'll respect the country's sovereignty when we go ahead and engage with them economically. Right? So these are the major divergences economically. But as an approach, now let's understand whether India is poised to act as the voice of the global south. Okay. But more importantly, this whole summit, virtual summit that is happening tomorrow. So you will have the Prime Minister who will address the opening session, and then the concluding session, the valedictory session, will also be presided over by the Prime Minister. So two different themes. Opening session, together for everyone's growth with everyone's trust. You see how the focus is on everyone. Again, collective. This is what I'm saying. India's approach is collective inclusion, whereas China's approach is collective or singular exclusion at times. Okay. So closing session's theme, Global South, again, collective, together for one future. Okay. Now, India positioning itself as a credible voice of the South. In the mains questions or in the mains examination, expect a question on these lines. Either you will be asked to critique that whether India is indeed emerging as a voice of the global South, or they will ask you to identify the challenges. Okay. Only two ways this can go. Now, when you start looking historically, so you look at, say, the non-aligned movement first. If school has taught us nothing else, it has taught us this, that the Bandung conference, right, led to the non-aligned movement. You had Youth Hant and Jawaharlal Nehru and Tito and all of them came together, and this was a solidarity group that said, well, we will not be a part of this Cold War equation, right? We will have our own sovereignty and our own decision making. You will not force us in choosing a side, right? This is the non-aligned movement. Now, from there, when you come to 2023, okay, not a lot has changed. In English, there is a saying, the more the things that change, yes, the more they remain the same, the more it looks the same. That's what's happening. The foundational seeds that were put during NAM, now they are coming and eventually going ahead and becoming full-fledged trees. Okay, let's go ahead and understand the initiatives for South-South cooperation first. Okay, so you had the BAPA conference, yes, Buenos Aires in Argentina, the plan of action for promoting and implementing technical cooperation among developing countries. Okay, just remember the BAPA thing, the BAPA resolution, which essentially said that countries of the South will come together for mutual benefit. And as a result, you had various groupings that came up. For example, the BRICS. Okay, we have all known of it. The IBSA came up. SARC also was there until one country decided to go completely rogue and then just scuttle the whole, initiative. SARC is almost like a dead duck now. No one cares. Okay, so IBSA, BRICS, these are, the primary areas of convergence of the global South. Okay, the bigger organizations. You have smaller organizations too, regional organizations too. Okay, and then you have the International Day for South-South Cooperation that's celebrated on observed rather, on the 12th of September every year. Okay. Now, let's go ahead and understand the initiatives that India has taken for the global South. So often you will hear this question, no? India is the voice of the global south, India is acting as the leader of the global south. Well, what are the evidences to back up that claim? Number one, okay, first biggest inclusion of the African Union as a member of the G20 in the New Delhi summit, right? And you will find this, that India used the G20 presidency to talk about the collective. Even now, you find that the themes that they're putting forward, that the government of India is putting forward, talks about collectives, together, everyone, right? And this has been the theme of India's G20 presidentship also, that finally culminated with African Union, 55 member states, which is in fact, you must know this, African Union, right? It's a continental union, right? 55 member states, okay, Pan-Africa membership, and now they are a member of the G20, right? All thanks to, or in fact, all under the credit, the presidentship of India's presidency. Number two, proposal on TRIPS waiver, another very crucial evidence. So during the coronavirus pandemic, you had the intellectual property regime that needed to be relaxed if all the countries were going to go ahead and innovate and find a solution to the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, globally, when you understand, the TRIPS waiver is very important, because unless this could be championed for, and India and South Africa were the two nations, the first two nations that came up for this, okay, then you were looking at, say, that IP regime being very strict, which means lack of innovation, research and development on medicines in the developing world. So if you cannot develop your own medicines, well, you will put your own population at risk, right? So this again, India took the lead with South Africa. Similarly, you're looking at vaccine Maitri, evacuation missions, all of that, India has taken the lead. Again, human to human. You know, the people to people connect that we talk about. This is a prime example of people to people connect. You must remember, no, the vaccine cartons that used to be sent out. What used to be sent out? From the people of India. You know, that's again a very strategically designed line. Yes, from the people of India to say whichever country it was going. Remember that particular photos we used to see. Okay? Now, greater representation in the multilateral institutions. So you had India at the G7 summit. Hiroshima, I believe. Prime Minister was there. And he talks about, once again, yes, he talks about reforms. He talks about inclusivity. What is he essentially hinting at? He went on to the extent of saying that the United Nations needs to reform, or else it will eventually go, and I am paraphrasing here, that eventually it will go the way of the League of the Nations. So is it that India is just speaking about itself? Well, partly yes, but more importantly, it is talking about the collective. That you cannot have a global body that can be controlled by just 4 or 5 organizations, the P5. What are the others are not worthy of that designation, right? This was again one of the primary agendas. Inclusive agenda and approach to combat climate change. You have the loss and damage concept, right? India has been at the forefront of that. The climate accountability that you talk about, right? Be it even setting your net zero goals, committing to, say, greening. You know, you have electrification drives going on, complete greening of sectors going on. India has taken the lead in that. Not just that, transfer of technology also, right? You're looking at UPI, that now India goes and exports to many countries, primarily in Africa also. Similarly, the COVID-19 dashboard, now much forgotten, but at one time it was of immense use. And you had India that went ahead and shared the technology, shared that particular code for that dashboard with the nations that so wanted it. Do you realize? So now the other countries may not be so very easy in sharing. You know, for them sharing may not be caring. But India talks about that collective. One of the key evidences as to why India is prime positioned, you know, best positioned to be the voice of the global south. But then there are some challenges also, guys. Let's understand the challenges now. ठीक है? Next, सबसे पहले, that you have China next door, right? And so India's engagement comes on the back of what? That we are developing economically, technologically, militarily. That you have a period of calm which allows you to engage in this nation building process that gets extended to, say, other countries across the world. But that can be changed if China, which is again the competitor as the voice of the global south, decides to go ahead and be much more hostile along the borders. Yes, you also have Pakistan. I'm taking it as a given that they are included in the conversation, right? Now, India's ban on the export of rice. Recently, you had the Indian government, that banned the export of rice. Now, India exports rice to many countries across the world. And so this untimely ban dents India's image as a net provider of food security. Do you realize this? As a net provider of food security. Right? So say the nations that were completely dependent on Indian rice, now they have to go ahead and look for other supply chains to source their own rice after the population needs to be fed. Right? So if India is to take a more active role, a more bigger role on the international forum, it needs to go ahead and plan for these, say, emergencies or events much more in the future, much more earlier, in fact, right? Similarly, Indian medicines causing fatalities in Africa, in other continents. Now, India emerged as the global pharma hub. India is considered to be the global pharma hub. But then, say isolated incidents as these do serve to dent India's image as a pharma hub. Again, who is receiving the majority of the pharma? Not the Western countries, but the poorer countries. Correct? And number 4 are domestic drawbacks, as say internal strifes, our security situation, all those could go ahead and potentially derail that period of calm that allows India to engage in domestic nation building and thus gives it the ability to go ahead and engage with the rest of the world, specifically the global south. Are you able to understand? So we have done, say, the voice of the global south. The summit is important. The themes are important. But more importantly, understand the macro perspective. Okay, we have looked at the evidences that point to the fact that India is a voice of the global south, and we have looked at the challenges that would potentially restrain India from playing a much more active role insofar as representing global south in the international fora is concerned. Okay, if you understood this too, I would once again request you to consider leaving me a like. It will greatly encourage me. Okay, right? Let's look at these questions then. Question number 3. The African Union. What type of a union is it? Continental union? Supranational political and economic union? Both A and B? Or none of the above? Question number 4. See, this is what happens when you wake up too early in the morning. The non-aligned movement owes its origin to what? Okay. New Delhi Conference, Bandung Conference, Lusaka Conference, or Johannesburg Summit? Okay. Easy questions. If you followed the discussion, if you understood the flow of the discussion, it shouldn't be very difficult for you. Okay. Right. Again, 60 seconds or less is what I'll take of you. This is also closing this evening, in fact. Okay. 1 p.m. You will have all of the links disabled for the optional subjects. I have stressed a lot in the past that a student should adequately prepare. In fact, greatly focus on their optionals up until at least December or January first week. Right? If any of you have not started yet, I would encourage you, get started. Time is of the essence for you. And what I will suggest is get hand-holding now. Okay? Obviously, preparing yourself is recommended. I would go ahead and suggest, if you're preparing yourself, all the best, in fact. But if you require a little bit of help, a bit of hand-holding, do make sure to sign up for these. Depending on your choice of subject, some really excellent faculty, men and women of immense caliber and mettle are in charge of these subjects. So take a look at the subjects for you: PSIR, Socio, Geography, Anthro, PABAD, History, Mathematics, Philosophy, and Hindi Sahitya. And make sure that you sign up before 1 p.m. this afternoon. Use the code BALIVE. And well, my best wishes are with you. Make sure that you target to finish at least 60 to 70% of both your papers before, say, January, latest second week, third week. Right? Okay, let's look at the questions of last class then. कल के class के सवाल देखते हैं. We discussed volcanic eruptions, the probability of volcanicity or volcanism in Iceland. So volcanic eruptions do not occur where? PYQ of 2001. Okay, if any of you are watching the question for the first time, very quickly leave your answers for me in the comment box. Meanwhile, let's look at the answer. So Baltic Sea, the deposition that you find in the Baltic Sea is essentially caused by glaciers, right? The rest of the areas, you find the depositions or the rocks that are created due to volcanic activity, okay? So Baltic Sea is the answer here. Where is the volcanic mountain Mount St. Helens located? Again, a question asked in 2005, right? So the answer here, it's simple GK. United States of A. Okay. Of late, Etna has also been going ahead and, well, it looks like it will explode, or it has been exploding, Mount Etna, right? If you're watching this again, let me know. Where is Mount Etna? Right? Question number 3. Which of the above is not a part of the Azores Triple Junction? So when you go ahead and compare, say, the Atlantic Sea, on one side you have North America, okay, South America, then you have Europe here, and you have the African continent here. Okay, so the Azores Triple Junction is somewhere here, and you have 3 particular plates that have a boundary there. That's why it's called a triple junction. Okay, the North American plate, the Eurasian plate, and the African or the Nubian plate. The South American plate is quite far away from the Azores Triple Junction. Okay, so this is not a part, which means B is my answer here. Right? Diamantina Trench, Indian Ocean, absolutely correct. Okay, Romanche Trench we discussed yesterday. Yes, it separates the North Atlantic and the South Atlantic. In the middle you have the Romanche Trench, right? Absolutely. Tonga Trench, the second deepest trench in the Pacific after the Mariana Trench. Italy is absolutely correct, coder. Well done. Okay? Tonga Trench is in the Pacific Ocean, the second deepest. The deepest is in fact the Mariana Trench that you all have studied since your childhood, but no one would have cared to know who is number 2. Okay? So all 3 pairs are correctly matched here. Let's look at the next question. Which of the above is not a part of the Chota Nagpur Plateau? Okay. So you have many rivers that originate out of the CNP, the Chota Nagpur Plateau. Barak River is nowhere near Chota Nagpur Plateau. Okay. If you have ever visited, I believe, Silchar, Silchar in Assam, you will have the Barak River, finding yourself having the best fishes from the Barak River. Okay. So the answer is Koel, Subarnanekha and Barakar. Not is being asked, which means C is my answer. Bihar, West Bengal, Chhattisgarh, Odisha and Jharkhand. Yes, these 5 states make my Chota Nagpur Plateau, the CNP, right? So, how many of the above are part of the Chota Nagpur Plateau? Well, all 4 are. Correct? D being the answer here. Okay. India is not a member of the APEC. By the way, President Xi Jinping and Joe Biden are meeting. They in fact just met. Just as I was entering into the class, I was looking at the outcomes of the meeting. And you will have a very important discussion on that, say, tomorrow. They're talking about mutual working on perception of each other. On perceptions now. So international politics or international geopolitics will now be a game of perceptions, which is essentially it is. But this is probably the first time 2 countries have gone ahead and said, okay, we'll speak good about you in our domestic politics and in our utterances, say with our allies and our partners. Okay. So the APEC summit, India is not a part of the APEC. It's there as an observer. Minister Piyush Goyal is attending the meeting. India is a member of the IPEF, which is the economic framework of the Quad. Right. So both A and B is correct here. Right. Let's look at those students who got this entire, say, 7 questions correct. Monica, Gopesh, Pooja, Shubham, Neeraja, Harshit, Vaishnavi, Coder, Akhil, Crystal, Mandeep, Karuna, Tanvi, Gatso, Ayush and Nishchay. Thanks guys. I had one student, I am missing the name, but one student asked me to go ahead and upload a PDF of the index of all the topics that we go ahead and do it. Well, we'll do it. Thanks for the suggestion. If you have any other suggestions, my friends, my students, do let me know in the comment box. I'll be more than happy to include them in the class. Okay. And here on, whenever we have, say, by the month end, I'll be uploading the index of the entire list of topics that we have covered in the Indian Express Explained class that comes to you every morning at 7 AM on StudyIQ IAS English. Okay. On that note, it's a wrap. Thanks for watching. Do make sure that you like the stream before you leave, and I'll see you tomorrow morning.